Good morning, Dragon Ball Infinity. It's me, you know who I am, and this is a roleplay review, a roleplay discussion, a conversation about the roleplay entitled Godsmacked. And in this log, we have Kimmy / Azaria, who is Lysaiko's daughter / follower, Zofu, and an NPC known as the Sage. This is a drama / combat log, and the synopsis written here is Zofu fulfills his promise to Kimmy and opens a portal to Earth. Little does he know that the portal leads to the fabled lookout of Korin Tower and the god of Earth. So I'm actually very glad that at the beginning of this log we get the chat OOC, because this is very important to this log. It's very pertinent to the story. But for those who don't really know, basically Zofu is using his demonic tier 2 racial ability to open up portals, only he doesn't really have the ability to control where this portal is going. So Zofu and Lai agreed that they were going to let chance tell them where on Earth they were. Zofu rolled a d20, or sorry, Sax rolled a d20, which is Lai, and got to 17. And if we go into the world anvil and we go to the planets and then we go to Earth, spot 17 on our Earth map is the Great Korin Tower. So right here we have the Great Korin Tower, and this is where they ended up going to on their random portal. And the funny thing about this is that the Great Korin Tower, as it's said here in the chat OOC, is it would be hilarious if we were on the lookout, because the tower itself has been destroyed. So their choices were emerge and fall to the ground, or be at the base of the tower, or the top of the tower, or the surface of the lookout. Zofu says the top of the tower would be the most interesting. No one has been there since the first age. And then when Rendo comes in, and you know how this is getting serious when Rendo gives a crap about roleplay, but he says, and relatively unknown, and no one knew it existed. So by random happen chance, they end up on one of the most elusive places on Earth, one of the least RP'd places on Earth, and they just randomly show up here. And then so, you know, going into the log, Sax says, well, I guess some freaking morts are going to learn some stuff today. And that's just really funny, and it's very important to the log here. But then it kind of opens up, and I'm not going to give you guys like a full synopsis, but it kind of opens up to, from the last log with the unicorn, Kimmy and Zofu are kind of chilling in Black Lay Castle, which I think is on Eon. And if somebody could, either in the comments or just on the mud, if you know of the logs that kind of explain Black Lay Castle, of like how Zofu became the lord of this, because I'm kind of out of touch with that bit of lore. If you could just link to me or comment to me, anything like that, that'd be great. But this is where they are, and this is kind of where Zofu is the lord of, and they're just kind of chilling. He opens up this portal, and boom, we get there. And what's really interesting about this as it opens up is there's a part at the beginning that I wish we could have expanded upon. I'm kind of rereading through this to where they end up on the lookout, right? And what I really would have loved would have been a little bit more exploration of the lookout, to really give it the sense of mystery and wonder that it should have had. So they arrive on the lookout, and instantly, you know, Zofu is kind of like, man, something's wrong. Like, I don't feel good. his hands are shaking, knees weak, arm are shaking. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom spaghetti. That's just what came to mind while I was reading this. And they end up on Earth, and what's really cool is that right away Kimmy's I don't know if it's like a HUD or if it's just her implants, but basically everything starts reconnecting to Legende and the satellites, and all of her spyware comes back online because boom, they're back on Earth. And that's kind of really cool how it instantly kind of ties her back to her roots and everything like that. But then it's like right away we see the Sage, right? And the Sage is the current guardian of Earth, and really the kami of Earth, which is cool because just recently, I want to say this is probably about 3 months ago, it was Konshu, myself, Rendo, and Eichenbahn. We're all just on admin channel talking about a pantheon for DBI and for the DBI verse. And one of the things that I would not let go, and I put my admin foot down, and I said, if we are going to have a kami, if we're going to have a guardian of Earth, it's going to be the Sage, who, I mean, if you've read the log by now, you know is in some relation to Zofu, but really the Sage is Cade from the very first age. It's Eichenbahn's, I don't know if it's his first character, but it was definitely his main character. And with him showing up again, for me personally, this is why I say this is like a personal review, not an admin review. It was awesome. It was awesome to see Cade again. It was cool that it's finally canon, because it's always been talked about, it's always been rumored, but now he's canon, right? Broly is canon again. And the fact that he is there, he is the guardian of Earth, I felt was very fitting, considering that way back in the first age when we had the greatest villain that we ever had in Red Shot, his greatest, I would say, battle was against Cade, which unfortunately Cade lost, but he was the only person who went 1v1 against the Great One and lost. But the fact that after all this time, I mean, even during his time, even during his age, Cade kind of just vanished and fell off the map. And that had a huge impact on my character, Ragnios, and his path forward. And I know this sounds, self-proclaiming or something like that, but really it was cool to see him again. It was cool to see that, he has taken up the mantle, and he's come and truly stepped into, I won't say really a hero role, but a big role in Earth and its future. And to be the guardian or protector of Earth it says a lot. And I feel like this was like a proper introduction to a god character. Not to say, like, I'm not going to talk about, the proving, but it was just like, hey, you've stepped into my realm, and now we're going to throw hands. But what's weird to me in this log is that how quickly he goes to hands, right? Like, they show up, and right away, like, Zofu was like, yep, we can't really tread here. And he says, to tread upon the stones is to invoke a challenge. You've cheated the trial of Korin Tower. Now you stand before me. Are you prepared? So Cade, at some point over his, almost 1,000 years of being around, went from like, I'm kind of intimidating, don't piss me off, to I see you in front of me, square up, bruh. I mean, he goes from zero to hands very quickly. And that's why I say, like, I kind of wish that there was a little bit more exploration, a little bit more of like, wow, where are we? This is, kind of, even from Kimmy, right? From Kimmy to be like, whoa, are you sure this is Earth? This is nowhere on Earth that I've ever seen, that I've ever studied. Like I have this HUD that has me connected to everything. I'm basically connected to the internet, and I should have all the information that I need or be able to get it, and like there's just nothing. And this is where like the deep Dragon Ball mystery lore could have really come into. But we get here and Sage is just like, nope, run them hands. It's time. And the fact that Zofu gets kicked off right away, totally understand, right? This is where, like, from an admin aspect, it's like I'm adminning and I'm NPCing, or I'm sorry, I'm playing my mortal and I'm NPCing as the big bad. It's just way easier for me to get rid of this character and then just NPC and be, you know, Kimmy versus Sage. But that's not a fair fight. That's just not fair. And then, you know, Kimmy has her fight with the Sage, and you know, it's a fight. It's a good fight, but for the sake of the review, I mean, it's a fight, guys. Like, it's a Dragon Ball-esque fight. She wants to, you know, cloak up and use her stun batons, and pretty much the Sage is just like, that's not gonna work. Nope, you're not gonna be able to hide out of this fight. You're not gonna be able to do anything. And what kind of, I feel like, was a missed opportunity here was that Kimmy stays like kind of too much in herself. And I don't want to say like this as a knock, but I just feel like if there was ever a time where your character kind of dropped all of the pseudo personas and was just very honest with themselves, like, now is the time, because you are completely out of your element, completely out of your depth. And I feel like in this fight, I guess it was like, it felt disjointed while reading it. And there was even a part where I, like, as I was reading it live, I had to go to Ike and be like, hey, like, how did you feel about this fight? Because it almost got a little too meta, where it felt like writer versus writer rather than character versus character. And Ike told me, he was like, nope, never felt that way. Like, I was just role playing, and I felt like Lai was just role playing his character. So if that's how you guys wrote it, that's great. But I can just tell you, as a reader, there was a bit, at least as I was reading it, that's just kind of how it felt, right? And the big thing was like here, right? So in Dragon Ball Roleplay, my character Nova has been using the Kuma Shinrei pretty much since she's been around, and she is not very proficient in it. Only recently in the proving was she able to pull this move off without it like destroying her from the inside out. And this is the progenitor of the attack, the skill. This is the master of it, and it's kind of like he does this big, I mean, the Kuma Shinrei is kind of like the Kame of our verse, and he does it, and it really feels like she just kind of whoop, like just kind of dodged out of the way. And there was never like a moment where I felt like this character knew how much danger they were actually in. And later on, when they're fighting, because yeah, he fires the Kuma Shinrei, she kind of whoops out of the way. I mean, she is taking damage, she is getting hurt, but when I was reading, I was like, man, I don't know if she understands, like, she could die at any moment. Right? Like, now is not the time to try to be the bluffing shadow agent. Like, you are tier 1, this thing doesn't have a tier. Like, we have a tier system, this thing isn't even in that realm. And, you know, like, our system is, unless you transform, everybody's tier 2. We don't know if he's transformed, we don't know if he's base, suppressed, whatever, and he's just doing whatever he wants. Like, this should have been like a Krillin versus Frieza moment, where it's like, I don't even know how strong you are, like, I can almost taste your power level, like, it's making my eyelashes hurt. Like, I'm in a lot of danger here. And Zofu kind of comes in, and when he comes back, it's like, he's the one that's kind of trying to, I don't want to say like amp up the danger, but he's like, listen, like, I brought her here, this is our fault. Like, he's almost saying like, I'm sorry, which for Zofu to say that, and I will say, when Zofu is using red text, right? He's invoking the voice of his father. For him to be speaking in that invocation and still trying to say like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to word it's serious, right? Like that's when he's like, I'm Master Prince Demon, and he's still trying to apologize. So that to me carried a lot of weight. But then it gets more into the fight, and what really threw me off, and what really was like, okay, are we arguing here? What's going on? Is it this post right here? She's, because basically the sage is saying like, hey, what are you guys fighting for? You guys are on the path to strength, to power. What is your reasoning for it? Explain yourself. And she's basically like, I don't have to explain myself to anyone, right? She didn't know her mother any explanation, her father any explanation, and then this I could have done without this. She sure didn't owe this pretentious god an explanation. She wanted to make sure her sister was protected. Everything else was secondary, and she didn't owe anyone a thing for making her own choice. Sure, right? Live your truth. Stay within yourself. But at the same time, like, it's almost like you're like going out of your way to rage against the machine, and the machine is just saying like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Like, you cheated your way here. So I'm giving you a chance to tell me why you're here, or even just tell me why you're on your path to power. And again, I just felt like a little bit of humility here, a little bit of a sense of danger, and how things are really not going your way right now. Having scope of yourself within the greater verse would have just done more for the character, right? If it's just like, hey, I'm fighting to protect my sister. Like, if you just said that to the character, like, I don't owe you an explanation, but the reason I'm here is because I'm trying to protect my sister. That's it. Just give us some resolution. But instead, she rages against the machine, and like this, it becomes less of a battle of strength versus like a battle of wills and a battle of ideals. But we don't get that back and forth, right? We just get the sage is kind of like beating the shit and murdering these guys while trying to give them like advice. And it just, I don't know, to me, it just kind of came off as a little weird. And then he switches his targets to Zofu and kind of says like, yeah, like you should have had your ass beat a lot for a very long time. And did you think that I was going to go easy on you? And it's like, yeah, sure. And I think with that, he was also in the same breath, that I'm going to say to you everything that I need to say to you to motivate you to be better, right? Even if I have to become your antagonist, even if you seek power on the path of hatred versus the path of virtue, you'll still get power on your own. You'll still do it on your own. And I think it worked. Now, again, it's Ike role-playing with himself at that point, but I think it worked. I think it motivated Zofu enough, because here, when he says the Kumashin FU, right, he's always wanted to be this thing, and he never could. And now he's face-to-face with it again, and he's like, you know what? I don't need to be like you. I don't need to be like my dad. I don't need to be like my brothers. I'm going to do this my way. So, again, I feel like if he just would have just said it, right? Or even have kind of thought it, I think it would have put a nice little bow on it. But one thing that I did miss about Zofu earlier that I wanted to speak on, good thing I got my notes here, is that Zofu skipping the trial of Korin is very on point with that character. Very on point with that character. Like if there was anybody who was going to cheat their way to getting here, it's Zofu, right? because that's his whole thing. His whole thing is just a middle finger to the world. Zofu being the I guess the golden sheep out of his family, because they're all black sheep, right? Him being the golden sheep out of the family, the one that isn't the warrior. His whole shtick has been, I'm gonna be the opposite of what everybody is. I'm gonna lie, cheat, steal, and F my way to the top. And, you know, like, that's why his illusion is a lie. Like, his skill set is lying, right? He isn't really as, I mean, he's powerful, but he doesn't have the presence that he does, but he wants everybody to think that he does, right? Like, he wants to cheat his way there, and which is fine. I mean, you not everybody is the world's strongest man. So if you want to compete with these people who can throw laser beams from their hands and fingertips, and, you know, topple pillars with their fists, if you want to compete with these people and you physically can't do it, you have to mentally do it. You have to, you know, have the golden tongue, the silver tongue, and you have to have, you know, these illusions and build it up until you get to the point where the lie becomes the truth. So yeah, I feel like him mistakenly cheating his way to the top was very on point with the character. And there was another part at the very beginning that I really loved, and I want to issue a challenge in this one, where Kimmy says, I wonder how long it would take us to mimic this teleportation spell with technology. And Zofu very matter-of-factly says, you never will. And I would argue that, yes, with technology that someone can, and my challenge is to Indon. And as I was writing this note down, it's like, hey, I challenge Indon to do this. I realized that technically, in the future, he will. Because for you guys who don't know, Indon has already made, or future Indon, I'm sorry, has already made a time machine. And that sent one of the Cyvers back in time. So yeah, he's already created a portal through dimensional space and time. So yeah, Indon, I challenge you to get make teleportation a real thing. But back to the log. It finishes in a way that is very fitting, right? So Kimmy basically just kind of gets mollywopped for a little bit. As she should, right? I mean, this is a tier 1 follower versus, again, something that's not even on our tier scale. And Zofu uses his illusion to kind of think or trick the sage into thinking that he's one place, and really he already threw Kimmy off, and he's jumping off of the lookout, and that's how they make their daring escape. And I love how he says, the sage says this at the end, like, well, that's not quite what I intended, but it's a start. Meaning that, again, he did all this intentionally, right? Like, it didn't, for the longest time, I was just feeling like, man, maybe we have another Tellar, right? Maybe we have, Tellar was the mortal who was like the evil guardian. I was thinking maybe this was Sage's fall from grace, when he just, you know, started throwing hands and was like, look, like, you shouldn't be here. I'm just going to murder you and throw your corpses off of here as a lesson to people to not cheat my trials. But it comes out that this was just all of a trial. All of it was a trial. The trying to shake somebody so much to where, yeah, they think that you're just a pretentious god, trying to push your nephew to the point of like, yeah, you're not a Kumashura and you never will be. You know, you can't do these things as our family can. You are the gold sheep of the family. And I think it really motivated them, both of these characters, to be better than what they are currently. So yeah, I at first when I read this log, I was like, okay, the jargon between the two writers is kind of jarring, kind of throwing me off. But then when I read it again, when I talked to Ike, I understood it more, right? Like once I knew that the angst wasn't real, and it was just something that maybe I created in my head from the way that I read it, it came out a lot better. And the fact that Kimmy is talking to Lai is really giving me like Battlestar Galactica vibes. I don't know if you guys remember that show from like the early 2000s, but there was a doctor on there who kind of had like the voice of God, I think it ended up being. But he just had like this voice, and he would see this woman always with him, and she was always talking to him. And he ended up being like fucking crazy. And that's what I get from Kimmy here, is where, you know, when it really gets tough, she's talking to her subconscious, which has taken the form of Lai in her head. Because I know for as long as she has known, he's been dead, but now she kind of has a feeling that he's alive. So that's been interesting. And it's just what I always see, is that, like, you know, she's sitting there and, you know, she's falling from the lookout, and then Lai's just sitting over there like falling with her, but he's like laying down, like sipping tea, like, oh, so you're alive, huh? And it's like, yeah, he was always gonna catch me. Like, you sure about that? Like, yeah, no, he's gonna catch me. Zofu's gonna catch me. And then he just catches her, and then like she looks over and Lai's not there anymore. So yeah, so they get caught. And then she basically has her people now that are going to take them back to the ranch. So for Godsmacked, this was a very good Dragon Ball Z combat log. There's a lot of stuff that's going on with you know, destruction of environments. And I mean, Sage has pretty much put on a show of 500 years of training. This is what I can do. And he's not even really trying. It looks like he's just kind of, you know, just having his way with him. They're two crash test dummies. And then, you know, we kind of get some backstory on Kimmy here about, you know, about her sister and about why she's been doing this. So we, the reader, get all of the answers that Sage was asking. We get those answers. But again, I just feel like if she just would have like told him, because the way I'm seeing it is I'm seeing like Goku standing in front of Kami and just being a little shit about it, right? Now, Goku and Kimmy are two totally different characters, but, you know, like there comes a point where you real recognizes real, and you're just like, man, this dude is real. Like, I can't bullshit with him. And, you know, like, it, again, role play your character. I'm just talking about how I am. I don't know how I would respond to this. I don't know how like Nova or Zalker or Sin would respond to something like this. I just know that I was like, man, and maybe it's just my personal thing because I'm seeing, you know, Cade come back. This was the person who traveled with one of my favorite characters I ever made. So, you know, maybe it's just me being personal, but outside of that, this was a good log. I mean, y'all got your RPP for it. So, I think we're almost at 30 minutes, and I'm going to wrap this up on a nice little bow. Good job, gentlemen, and I will see the rest of you on the chat channel.